What if the hardest person to protect yourself from is not an enemy? What if it is someone whose name is connected to yours? Someone who knows your childhood stories? Someone who can sit at the same table with you, smile in front of others, and still leave you feeling smaller when the day is over? That is what makes toxic family so confusing. If a stranger disrespects you, you can walk away, and people understand. If a coworker drains you, you can change your distance, and no one questions it. But when it is family, suddenly the world becomes complicated. But nobody asks what that blood has cost you. Nobody asks how many times you swallowed your voice to keep peace. Nobody asks how many conversations you replayed at night, wondering if you were too sensitive, too cold, too selfish, or too broken. Nobody asks what happens to a person who keeps returning to a place that hurts them simply because that place is called home. A toxic family does not always look like shouting, chaos, or obvious cruelty. Sometimes it looks normal from the outside. It looks like holidays, phone calls, forced smiles, group photos, polite dinners, and messages that seem harmless until your body tightens before you even answer them. Sometimes the damage is not one big wound. It is 1,000 small moments that teach your nervous system to stay alert around people you were supposed to trust. And that is why this matters. Because if you do not learn how to deal with toxic family, you may spend your whole life trying to earn safety from people who are not capable of giving it. You may confuse guilt with love. You may confuse silence with peace. You may confuse endurance with strength. And slowly, without noticing, you may become loyal to the very patterns that keep hurting you. So today, we are going to talk about 7 things to do when family becomes toxic. Not so you can hate them. Not so you can become cold. Not so you can turn your pain into another war. But so you can stop abandoning yourself just to stay connected to people who keep asking you to disappear. Number 1. Stop expecting emotional safety from unsafe people. This is one of the hardest truths to accept, because the child inside you may still be waiting for the parent to finally understand, waiting for the sibling to finally respect you, waiting for the relative to finally see your pain without turning it into an argument, waiting for one calm conversation that proves everything can still become what you always hoped it would be. But emotional safety cannot be forced out of someone by explaining yourself better. You cannot make an unsafe person safe by choosing the perfect words. You cannot make someone gentle by becoming easier to handle. You cannot turn emotional immaturity into emotional maturity by being patient enough. And you cannot keep injuring yourself on the hope that this time they will finally be different. Many people stay trapped because they keep relating to family through potential instead of reality. They do not respond to who the person is. They respond to who they wish the person could become. They keep thinking, maybe this year will be different. Maybe this conversation will open their eyes. Maybe if I stay calm enough, they will finally hear me. Maybe if I explain my heart one more time, they will stop treating it like something to correct. Acceptance does not mean you approve of what happened. It does not mean you stop loving them. It does not mean the pain was fair. Acceptance means you stop arguing with the evidence. You look at the pattern, not the promise. You look at the behavior, not the apology that never becomes action. You look at how your body feels after being around them, not the role they are supposed to play in your life. The moment you stop expecting emotional safety from unsafe people, something inside you begins to come back. You stop walking into every interaction with your heart wide open, hoping they will handle it carefully. You stop measuring your worth by whether they finally understand you. And that leads to the second thing. Because once you stop expecting safety from people who have not shown it, you also have to stop giving them unlimited access to your explanations. Number 2. Stop explaining your pain to people who benefit from misunderstanding you. There is a kind of conversation that looks like communication but is actually a trap. You begin by saying how something affected you. You try to be honest. You choose your words carefully. You soften your tone. You say, I am not attacking you. I'm just trying to explain how I feel. And somehow, by the end of the conversation, you are defending yourself against accusations you never made. Now you are not talking about your pain anymore. You are explaining why you are not selfish. You are explaining why you are not disrespectful. You are explaining why you are not ungrateful. You are explaining why you have the right to feel hurt in the first place. This is how toxic family systems exhaust people. They do not always deny your feelings directly. Sometimes they redirect them. They make your reaction the problem. They make your boundary the problem. They make your tone the problem. They make the timing the problem. And after enough conversations like this, you start to lose trust in your own inner world. A person who wants to understand you will not need you to bleed emotionally before they take you seriously. They may not agree with everything. They may need time. They may have their own perspective. But they will not use your vulnerability as evidence against you. They will not punish you for being honest. They will not turn every conversation into a trial where you must prove you are allowed to be hurt. Some people do not misunderstand you because you are unclear. They misunderstand you because understanding you would require them to take responsibility. And if misunderstanding you protects their image, their comfort, or their control, then your explanations will never be enough. This is where maturity begins to look very quiet. You stop sending long messages to people who read them only to find one sentence to attack. You stop rehearsing perfect speeches for people committed to hearing you badly. You stop trying to win a case in a room where the verdict was decided before you spoke. You are allowed to say less. You are allowed to keep some parts of yourself private. You are allowed to say, I have already explained this, and I am not going to keep arguing about my own experience. That sentence may feel uncomfortable at first, especially if you are trained to over-explain in order to stay safe. But peace often begins with the words you finally stop saying. And when you stop explaining yourself to people who benefit from confusion, the next challenge appears. Because they may try to make you feel guilty for changing. That is when you must learn the difference between guilt and responsibility. Number 3. Learn the difference between guilt and responsibility. Toxic family systems often survive by making the healthiest person feel like the cruel one. The moment you stop accepting disrespect, they say you have changed. The moment you stop answering every call, they say you are distant. The moment you stop showing up for every crisis, they say you forgot where you came from. The moment you set one boundary, they act like you have betrayed the entire family. This is where many people collapse. Not because the boundary is wrong, but because the guilt feels unbearable. You feel selfish for needing space. You feel cold for protecting your peace. You feel guilty for disappointing people who never seemed guilty about hurting you. But guilt is not always a moral signal. Sometimes guilt is just the emotional withdrawal from an old role. If you were trained to be the fixer, you will feel guilty when you stop fixing. If you were trained to be the quiet one, you will feel guilty when you speak. If you were trained to absorb everyone else's emotions, you will feel guilty when you hand them back. If you were trained to earn love through obedience, self-respect may feel like betrayal before it feels like freedom. Responsibility asks, what is truly mine? Guilt screams, how do I make them comfortable again? Responsibility can apologize for a real mistake. Guilt apologizes for having a boundary. Responsibility helps where it can. Guilt tries to rescue people from the consequences of their own choices. Sometimes the right choice will still make you feel guilty. Sometimes protecting your peace will disappoint someone. Sometimes saying no will create tension. Sometimes stepping back will make people talk. But the presence of guilt does not automatically mean the absence of wisdom. It may simply mean you are practicing a new kind of loyalty. A loyalty to truth. A loyalty to your mental health. A loyalty to the person you are becoming. Ask yourself this before you act from guilt. Did I actually do something wrong, or did I simply stop playing the role they preferred? Did I harm them, or did I stop letting them harm me without consequence? Am I being cruel, or am I finally being honest? When you understand this difference, you become harder to manipulate. You can apologize when you are wrong, without apologizing for existing. You can care about people without becoming responsible for their every feeling. You can love your family without surrendering your nervous system to their reactions. And that understanding prepares you for the fourth thing. Because once guilt no longer controls you, your boundaries can become quieter, cleaner, and stronger. Number 4. Set boundaries without turning them into a courtroom. Many people think a boundary has to be a dramatic speech. They imagine a long conversation where they finally explain everything, list every wound, prove every pattern, and make the other person understand why the boundary is necessary. But often, the more dramatic the announcement becomes, the easier it is for toxic people to turn the focus away from the boundary itself. Now they are arguing about your tone. Now they are arguing about your examples. Now they are arguing about your memory. Now they are arguing about whether you should have said it at all. A boundary is not a courtroom. You do not need to present evidence for your peace. You do not need a closing argument. You do not need to convince everyone that your limit is reasonable before you are allowed to honor it. A real boundary is not primarily what you say. It is what you consistently do. It is not, please stop talking to me that way, repeated 20 times while you stay in the same conversation. It is, I am not available for this tone, and then leaving the conversation when the tone continues. It is not, I need space, followed by answering every message immediately because you are afraid they will be upset. It is taking the space. This is why boundaries feel powerful but also frightening. They require action. They require consistency. They require you to stop negotiating with people who only respect limits when those limits are convenient for them. Start small if you need to. You can say, I am not discussing this right now. You can say, I will leave if the conversation becomes disrespectful. You can say, I am not available for last-minute pressure. You can say, I am not going to explain this again. You can say, I love you, but I am not carrying this conversation today. Then comes the important part. Do what the sentence says. Not with revenge, not with a performance, not to punish them, just with calm consistency. The people who benefited from your lack of boundaries may call your peace arrogance. They may call your clarity disrespect. They may call your distance cold. But remember this, people who were comfortable with your silence may experience your self-respect as an attack. That does not make it an attack. It only means the old arrangement is being challenged. A boundary does not ask, how can I make sure nobody is upset? A boundary asks, what must I do to remain whole? And sometimes, remaining whole means letting someone be upset without rushing to repair the feeling they created in themselves. This brings us to the fifth thing, because when boundaries become real, you also begin to see how much emotional weight you have been carrying that never belonged to you. Number 5. Refuse to carry family drama that was never yours. In many families, one person becomes the emotional container for everyone else. They are the one people call when there is conflict. They are expected to listen, mediate, explain, calm, comfort, absorb, forgive, and return the family to normal. They become the quiet place where everyone leaves their stress. And because they are good-hearted, they often mistake this role for love. But being useful is not the same as being loved. Being needed is not the same as being respected. Being the person everyone turns to does not mean everyone cares about what it costs you. Family drama can become addictive because it gives people a sense of importance. There is always a crisis, always a complaint, always someone not speaking to someone, always a new version of the same old story. And if you are sensitive, loyal, or highly aware, you may feel pulled into the center of it before you even choose. But not every emotional emergency is your assignment. Not every argument needs your opinion. Not every angry message deserves your response. Not every crisis becomes your responsibility just because someone handed it to you with urgency. There is a question that can change everything. Is this mine to carry? Because if you carry what belongs to everyone else, eventually you will have no strength left for your own life. You will know everyone's pain but lose touch with your own needs. You will become an expert in other people's patterns while neglecting your own healing. You will become so busy managing emotional fires that you forget to build anything peaceful for yourself. Refusing to carry family drama is not abandonment. It is discernment. It is saying, I can love you without entering this chaos. I can care about the outcome without becoming the emotional referee. I can wish you well without letting your crisis control my entire day. I can be compassionate without becoming available for unlimited access. So pause before you respond. Let the first wave pass. Ask yourself, what part of this is truly mine? If it is yours, handle it with maturity. If it is not yours, put it down without guilt. And once you stop carrying what was never yours, you may notice another weight underneath it. The weight of waiting for someone to finally apologize. That is the sixth thing. Number 6. Let go of the apology that keeps you stuck. Some pain stays alive because a part of you is still waiting for the person who caused it to finally name it correctly. You are waiting for them to say, I understand now. You are waiting for them to say, I should not have treated you that way. You are waiting for them to say, you were not crazy, you were hurt. You are waiting for them to say, I am sorry, without excuses, without reversal, without making you comfort them for the guilt they suddenly feel. And maybe that apology would matter. Maybe it would bring relief. Maybe it would help a part of you finally exhale. But your life cannot remain paused until someone else develops the courage to face what they did. This is one of the painful truths of healing. Some people will never apologize, because apologizing would require them to meet a version of themselves they have spent years avoiding. Some people cannot give you closure because they are still protecting the story in which they were always right. Some people need you to be dramatic, sensitive, ungrateful, or difficult because that version of you allows them to avoid accountability. So what do? You stop making their apology the key to your freedom. You stop treating their emotional maturity as the doorway to your healing. You stop waiting outside a locked room, hoping the person inside will finally invite you in and explain why they hurt you. Healing without an apology does not mean pretending it did not happen. It does not mean protecting their reputation at the cost of your reality. It does not mean you have to reconcile. It does not mean you have to trust them again. It means you stop letting their refusal to take responsibility become another chapter of your suffering. You can validate your own experience. You can say, what happened hurt me. You can say, I deserved better. You can say, I do not need them to agree with my pain for my pain to be real. You can say, I am allowed to move forward even if they never understand the damage. There is a quiet dignity in no longer begging for acknowledgement from people invested in denial. There is a quiet power in giving yourself the words they never gave you. There is a quiet freedom in deciding that your future will not be held hostage by someone else's unfinished conscience. And when you stop waiting for the apology, you begin to face the final and most important work. You do not just escape their chaos. You build a life where their chaos no longer controls your nervous system. Number 7. Build a life where their chaos no longer controls your nervous system. This is the deeper goal. Not just fewer arguments. Not just shorter phone calls. Not just better boundaries. The deeper goal is to become a person whose inner world no longer rises and falls according to the emotional weather of a toxic family system. Because sometimes you can leave the room, but the room still lives inside you. You can move out, but still hear their voices in your decisions. You can stop answering the calls, but still feel panic when the message appears. You can set boundaries, but still feel your body preparing for punishment. You can be grown, successful, independent, and still feel like a child the moment they disapprove of you. That is why healing is not only about distance. It is about retraining your nervous system to understand that you are no longer trapped. Your body may have learned to scan for mood changes. It may have learned to predict anger before it arrives. It may have learned to become agreeable before conflict begins. It may have learned to explain, apologize, shrink, perform, or disappear in order to stay connected. Those responses were not weakness. They were adaptations. They helped you survive environments where being fully yourself did not feel safe. But what once protected you can later imprison you. The same awareness that helped you avoid conflict can turn into anxiety. The same people-pleasing that helped you stay accepted can turn into resentment. The same silence that helped you avoid punishment can turn into emotional loneliness. So the work now is not to hate the old version of you. The work is to thank that version for surviving. Then gently teach your body a new reality. You are allowed to pause before answering. You are allowed to let a message sit. You are allowed to disagree without collapsing. You are allowed to be misunderstood without rushing to repair the image someone has of you. You are allowed to have a private life. You are allowed to choose peace without presenting it as a request for permission. Eventually, you begin to realize that freedom is not always a dramatic exit. Sometimes freedom is answering calmly. Sometimes freedom is not answering at all. Sometimes freedom is attending the gathering but leaving before your body shuts down. Sometimes freedom is loving someone from a distance that protects both your heart and your sanity. Sometimes freedom is no longer needing the people who hurt you to become the people who heal you. So let us bring this together. When family becomes toxic, you do not have to become toxic in return. You do not have to win every argument. You do not have to convince everyone that your pain is valid. You do not have to destroy the relationship to stop destroying yourself. You start by seeing unsafe people clearly. You stop explaining your pain to people who use confusion as protection. You separate guilt from responsibility. You set boundaries through action, not speeches. You refuse to carry drama that was never yours. You release the apology that keeps your life on hold. And you build a life where their chaos no longer controls your nervous system. None of this means you stop caring. It means you stop confusing care with self-abandonment. It means you stop calling emotional exhaustion love. It means you stop treating family roles as permission slips for disrespect. It means you finally understand that peace is not something you earn after everyone else is satisfied. Peace is something you protect because your life is also happening. Maybe they will understand one day. Maybe they will not. Maybe the relationship will improve. Maybe it will need distance. Maybe some people will adjust to the healthier version of you. Maybe others will only miss the version they could control. But the question is no longer, how do I make them comfortable with who I am becoming? The question is, how many more years of my life am I willing to lose trying to be loved by people who only accept me when I abandon myself? And maybe that question is not meant to be answered all at once. Maybe it is meant to follow you quietly into the next phone call, the next family gathering, the next moment when guilt tries to pull you back into the old version of yourself. Because change does not always begin with a dramatic decision. Sometimes it begins with one slower breath before you respond. One message you do not rush to explain. One boundary you keep, even when your hands shake. One honest moment where you realize that loving your family should not require losing yourself. So if this spoke to something you have been carrying for years, do not ignore that feeling. Listen to it. Let it remind you that peace is not betrayal. Let it remind you that you are allowed to belong to yourself, even inside a family that taught you to belong to everyone else first. Healing may not make every relationship simple. It may not give you the apology you wanted, or the understanding you waited for, or the version of family you imagined when you were younger. But it can give you something just as powerful. It can give you yourself back. And maybe, after everything you have survived, that is where your real life begins. Not in their approval, not in their repair, but in the quiet return to your own soul.